All right. We are here to talk about the ethics of Immanuel Kant. Let me talk a little bit real quick about who Kant was, tell one little interesting story about him to sort of humanize the man. And then we'll go into his ethics. What we're gonna see is that Kant, whether he conceived of himself this way or not, presents us with an alternative to utilitarianism. That is, in one sense, Kant can explain for us why it is that we sometimes should not do something even though it will make for the most happiness. Here's a question we had about utilitarianism. It's a great theory in some ways, but it had some big problems. It commits us to injustice, right? If sometimes it requires us to do something unjust if we're going to maximize happiness by doing so. But you still end up with this question, which is, it, happiness is a good thing. Why should I not maximize it? Give me an explanation of why there are things I shouldn't do, even though they will maximize happiness. You can't just stomp your foot and tell me that we can't do these things. Kant offers us such an explanation. He gives us an explanation of why it is that sometimes we shouldn't maximize happiness. Today, we're going to see that explanation. So let me show you a picture of Kant and simultaneously start our screen share. So here's Kant, Immanuel Kant. He lived in the 18th century mostly. He lived a tiny bit into the 19th century, lived to be an old man by the standards of the day. I believe he lived to be about 80. He was a German. He lived in Prussia, what was then Königsberg, what is now Kaliningrad in Russia. But at the time, it was part of Prussia, which is now mostly part of Germany. He was very stereotypically German in at least one respect, which was that he was incredibly punctual. So one of the stories that people tell about Kant is that people in Königsberg would set their clocks by his daily walk. They knew, he starts his walk at the same time every day exactly. He walks at exactly the same pace. And so I know it's going to be 2:18, for example, when he passes my house. You couldn't just Google what time it was. So that was as good of a measure as any. So that's Kant. Um, let's talk a little bit about Kant's philosophy. We've already talked about it as being an alternative to utilitarianism. Let's start with a case, though. So we'll see how the utilitarian answers this case, and then we'll see how Kant is able to actually answer differently than the utilitarian here. So assume this guy, Jeff, I just made this guy up. He needs $5,000 to save his house, or else he and his family will be out on the street. Let's say he has a wife and 3 kids. And let's say that because he's in between jobs, he can't get a loan because of just the way loans work. Let's not spend 5 minutes hashing this out. So he goes into a small local bank. He knows of a way that he could falsify his credentials, and he knows reliably that he could get away with it, and he gets the loan. This helps him just make ends meet for just long enough until he starts his next job, gets his next paycheck, and can pay off the loan. And then he can pay off his debt on the house. And let's just assume, well, you got to listen to me on this. We've got to make some assumptions here for this case to work. Let's just assume, for the sake of argument, that he knows it's going to work. And he's not just being arrogant, and that no one's going to find out. He knows, let's say he used to work in a bank. I don't know. Or he's like some Walter White level genius that he knows exactly how this sort of stuff works. He knows he's going to get away with it. He knows no one's going to find out. And he knows he's going to be able to pay back the loan. All right. So question, if he does this, did he do something wrong? He definitely lied to the bank, falsified credentials. Now, we're not asking whether he did something illegal, right? We're asking whether he did something morally wrong. Those two things can come apart. They're different things. So did he do something morally wrong? This is also different from the question of whether you would do the same thing, right? I will be the first to admit that there are many things that I would say I would do, but that are morally wrong, just because I know myself and I'm not perfect. Okay, but did he do something morally wrong? A lot of people want to say he did do something at least slightly morally wrong. Here's the issue. He lied. right? He did something morally wrong. He falsified credentials. Um, maybe some people don't want to say he did something wrong because it's very hard for them to sympathize with the banks. But this is a small local bank, right? You're lying to individuals that you live in a community with. Again, if that's still a hang up for you and you still think he didn't do something wrong, maybe change the case to where he has to take the money from his mother's purse, or his, cousin's purse, or anybody that he has a close relationship with. But again, he knows he can get away with it, and he knows that he can pay them back before they're going to be able to find out. It's never going to hurt them. They're not going to need the money, and they're not going to find out before he can get the money back. Has he done something wrong by stealing the money? And maybe in this case, if you weren't already on board with saying he did something wrong, you might think he did something wrong. The problem from the perspective of utilitarianism is this. Looks like Jeff didn't do anything wrong. In fact, no one is worse off, and he and his family are better off. The bank, or in the second case, the modified case, the mother or the cousin or whatever, does not hurt for lacking the money. He's able to get it back in time. They never even find out. So in their minds, it's like nothing ever happened. And yet he gets to keep his house and his kids get to not be on the street. And so if you're a utilitarian, it seems like not only is it okay to lie or to steal in the second case, but in fact, you're obligated to, because what you're obligated to do is to maximize happiness. And this is the action that maximizes happiness. So not only is it not wrong, but it'd be wrong not to do it. Okay, so if you were on board, if you were one of these people who heard this case or heard at least the second modified case and thought that seems wrong, then you might wonder what could explain why it's wrong. What could explain why this is wrong when it maximizes happiness? And here is where Kant comes into the rescue. He's going to be able to explain to us why not only this lie or not only this theft in the second case is wrong, but why really at least most, Kant thinks all, that's going to be a sore subject, but at least most lying and at least most stealing is morally wrong, even when it could maximize happiness if you did it, or even when it would surely maximize happiness if you did it. Kant can still explain why it's wrong. So that's the tease. And now let's try to explain Kant's view so that we can see why that turns out to be true. All right, so here's what Kant says. Here's as clear as he's a notoriously difficult philosopher to read, and this is about as clear as he ever gets. He says the imperative of duty may be expressed thus. That is, your moral obligation may be expressed in this way. Act as if the maxim of your action were to become by your will a universal law of nature. I'd invite you to pause here and reflect on what he could possibly mean by this. This is a short claim, but it's dense. What does this mean to act as if the maxim, first of all, what the heck is a maxim, of your action were to become by your will a universal law of nature? Now, it might seem like what he's saying is that you should do, what the universal laws say, whatever, maybe the universal laws of nature. But that's not what he's saying. He's saying act as if your action were to become a universal law of nature, as in it's not now a universal law, but imagine that what you're thinking about doing were to become a universal law of nature, and then act accordingly. So let's try to break down what he means by that. Let's start by comparing his answer with utilitarianism. They're answering fundamentally the same question. When is an action wrong? What makes an action wrong is a different way of asking that. And the utilitarian says, hey, it's wrong whenever it fails to maximize net happiness. Here's Kant's alternative answer to this. It's wrong whenever you couldn't achieve your goal if everyone acted on the same maxim. That's a little bit clearer than the prior slide formulation, but still we don't know what a maxim is. So let's talk about that. A maxim is pretty simple. There's a lot of debate in Kant scholarship on this, but the way we're going to formulate this is your maxim is just your intention and your goal in acting. So your intention is pretty straightforward in any given case. It's just what you're intending on doing. It's just the action itself in some way. The goal in acting is often less clear. Often we are not as clear even with ourselves about what our own goals are. And sometimes it will only come out through reflection or through thinking about alternatives or what might happen if things went differently, that we can figure out what our goal actually was. So just a simple case though, if I'm planning on getting a job so I can provide for my family, the getting a job is the intention part. That's just what I'm going to do. And then the goal of getting that job is to provide for my family. And again, I might not be thinking about that goal. I might have to reflect on it. If I'm just going in for a job interview and you ask me why I want the job, first of all, I might not tell you to provide for my family in the job interview. I'm going to make up some answer that flatters you as a company or something. But if I'm being honest, I might sit there and think, well, I guess ultimately the reason I want to work this job is not because I'm bored and want something to do with my time. I guess ultimately the reason I need a job is because I want money to provide for my family. Okay, maxim, that's what a maxim is. It's very important to understand, though, that the maxim involves the intention and the goal in acting, because this is a really important point. For Kant, whether the action is right will depend on especially the goal. And we'll talk about how that might be true in just a second. So one way that we could talk about his theory is to break it down into these 3 steps. I kind of hesitate to do this because it makes it seem like this simple step-by-step process for figuring out what you should do. And that makes it seem a little more shallow than it really is. But it's going to be helpful to break it down just so that you understand his thinking. He's not telling you this is every decision you make, you should think through these steps. That's not what he's doing. But if we're thinking about what makes an action wrong, really, these steps will be helpful to understanding on his theory where does wrongness come from. All right, so let's think through the steps, and then we'll, in our next video, think through some of the deeper issues about really what does this say about what makes wrong actions wrong. So first is just formulate your maxim. That's the first step. You got to figure out what you're going to do, what you're intending on doing, and what the goal of that action is. The second step is really crucial, and this goes back to the imagine it being a universal law of nature, or act as if it were a universal law of nature. You have to imagine that everyone with that goal, not everyone in the world, but everyone with that goal forms that intention and acts in that way. So imagine, if I'm saying I want to get a job to provide for my family, all right, now I got to imagine that everyone who wants to provide for their family, that is everyone with my goal, does the same thing as me, tries to get a job or gets this job. Third and final step, we have to ask ourselves, in that universalized world where everyone with my goal does the same thing as me, can I still achieve my goal when everyone else who wants that same thing is doing the same thing? And if the answer is no, the action is wrong. If I couldn't still do it, or if I couldn't still achieve my goal when everyone else with that goal did the same thing, that's wrong. But if I could still do it, if my action is compatible with everyone who wants the same thing doing the same thing, then it's okay. Now, you might be wondering, like, what is the relevance of any of this? Like, why is this the process? And we'll talk about that. I think there's something really deep going on in Kant. And this, 3-step BuzzFeed level or order of thinking through things doesn't immediately reflect that, but we'll talk about it. But first, let's apply this to some cases. So let's think through 3 cases. I'm actually going to take these out of order because after writing them, I realized that the second one is maybe even more complicated than the third one. So let's do 1, 3, 2. So imagine someone wants to run a red light because he's in a hurry, wants to get where he's going faster. Is it morally permissible to run that red light in this situation? Well, what's his maxim? That's step 1. He's going to run the red light. That's the intention. What's the goal? It's kind of stated here. He wants, and in most cases, it's the same thing. You want to get where you're going faster. Universalize that. That's step 2. So imagine everyone who wants to get where they're going faster runs red lights. You kind of have to think about what a world would be like where everyone, really, this is most people that are driving, right? 99% of people want to get where they're going faster. So you're really imagining a world where most people on the road run red lights. And you got to think through all the consequences of that, what that world would look like. And then you have to ask your third question, which is, or you have to go to your third step, which is the question, um, could he still achieve his goal, which again, remember, is getting where he's going faster in the world where all of these people on the road are also running red lights? And in this case, it's not hard to see that he could not still achieve his goal if everyone on the road were running red lights. Best case scenario, he has to proceed with great caution, treating every intersection as like this new situation that he has to evaluate. But probably that's too hopeful. It's too aspirational. Really, what he's going to confront is this anarchical situation with wrecks in every intersection where no one's paying attention to any lights. And he might not make it where he's going at all in the very real worst case scenario because he might get hit in an intersection. But he's certainly not going to get where he's going faster than if he just than if everyone were respecting the intersections. Okay, let's pause here for a second. I said earlier that for Kant, the permissibility of your action really depends on your goal. So what's going on in your head? And this is really, we can see this here. So this is case one is a generic case. It's where most people end up when they run red lights or are tempted to run red lights. It's not pressing or necessary. They're just in a hurry. They just want to get where they're going faster. But imagine someone who has a different goal, same intention, but different goal and therefore different maxim. So imagine someone who his intention is the same thing, to run the red light, but the goal is actually to save someone's life. So they've got someone in their car who's dying. Maybe they're bleeding out in the back seat, and they're trying to get them to the hospital as quickly as possible to save their life. So the maxim is same intention, run the red light, but the goal is to get this person bleeding out in the back seat to the hospital faster. So what that does is it really restricts the class of people you're going to universalize across. So in the first case, the case one, the original case, when we said universalize, we had to universalize across, we had to imagine the vast majority of people on the roads doing what Derek does. Because we said, imagine everyone with the same goal, which is almost everyone doing the same thing. So that's almost everyone is running red lights. But in this case, we say, imagine everyone with the same goal, that is someone who's trying to save someone's life, runs red lights to get to the hospital faster. Well, how many people are going to be running red lights in that world? Really not more than a few, because not many people at any given time driving around on the streets are driving in order to save someone's life. I mean, I don't know, you probably pass one every other day, maybe at most. That seems high, honestly. And so the intersections will still be respected by the vast majority of the people on the roads. And so you actually could still achieve your purpose when everyone in your situation, that is trying to save a life, is doing what you're doing. In that universalized world, you don't really increase your risk of not achieving your goal at all. Okay, so in that way, this is a cool feature of Kant's view, which is that whether something is right or wrong can actually depend on your motives and the reasons why you're doing something. This is something that utilitarianism actually lacked, right? So at least most forms of utilitarianism, at least classical forms of utilitarianism, your action is wrong if you fail to maximize happiness. It kind of doesn't matter what your motives were. Although we did see one version of utilitarianism, the expected results version of utilitarianism, that says it depends on what you expect to happen, right? But even that is not quite close to your goals and motives, right? If you're doing what you expect to result in the greatest amount of happiness, that still doesn't say anything about why you're doing that. It doesn't require that you have a certain sort of motive or intention or goal. Whereas Kant, what's right or wrong can depend on your goals. Okay, so we won't belabor that anymore. Let's think through these other two cases. We'll move through case three a little quickly. If you're thinking about faking an injury at Six Flags to go to the front of the line, run it through the process. Your goal is to fake, or so your intention is to fake the injury. Your goal is to get to the front of the line. Well, now imagine everyone who wants to get to the front of the line, which again is virtually everyone at Six Flags. No one is going there to stand in line and the rides are a distraction, right? They're trying to get to the front of the line. The line is the part they have to put up with, and the ride is what they want to do. So imagine everyone virtually everyone at Six Flags, faking an injury, can you still achieve your goal, which again, remember, was to get to the front of the line? No, you couldn't. So it's wrong. So we got case one, wrong. Case three, wrong. Case two is a little bit more difficult and might actually present a little bit of a problem for Kant, but we'll do our best and we'll argue on his behalf as best we can. So you're considering paying someone to write your history essay for you. Your goal is probably to make a good grade without doing work, without doing much work. Imagine everyone who wants to make a good grade without doing much work pays someone online to write their American history essay. Again, this is probably going to be most people in the class. Very few people in any given class don't want to make a good grade and do want to do a lot of work that they wouldn't have to do otherwise. So now we have to ask ourselves, could you still get a good grade without doing any work or without doing much work in the world where everyone else is doing the same thing? Hard here, because you could make the case on either side. You could say, well, yeah, you could still do it, because as long as nobody is using the same person and getting the same essay, the professor is not going to find out. The professor may not be grading on a curve, and so he's going to allow that everyone gets a great grade. So yeah, you could still do it. On the other hand, what if the professor is grading on a curve? What if everyone doing really well means that you're just middle of the pack again, whereas if no one else had cheated, you would have done better than everybody else? What if the professor finds out even without any two people having the same essay? What if he says these are way better than they normally are in any given semester? How could that be? And then he starts digging and finds out. So a lot of it depends on the details of the case. If you're Kant here, if you're Kant here, you'll probably want to say, Kant would want to say that cheating is wrong. I know that because it's a form of lying, probably. At least I think that's probably what he'd want to say. And if you're trying to push for that, you might say, yeah, you've got to imagine everyone doing this, and the professor is going to get suspicious, and therefore it wouldn't work if everybody did it. But at the same time, if you're critical of Kant, if you think he can't get the answer he wants here, you'll say, yeah, there's no reason to think that's true. It's going to come out permissible on Kant's system, which is a bad thing, at least if you want to say that cheating is wrong. Or you might even get a weirder result, which is that cheating is only wrong when you're bad at it, right? Because that's the only time that your action of cheating will not be universalizable, is when everyone cheats poorly. Then the professor will find out and you couldn't get what you wanted. But if you're smart and you universalize and say everyone cheats in the smart way, then it seems like it could work. And then you get this weird result, which is that it looks like Kant has to say that cheating is only wrong if you're bad at it. And that seems like a bad result. So I'm not saying, so here we're sort of jumping forward into this critical phase of Kant, where we say here might be some problems for Kant's theory. There might be a problem if your theory ends up saying that cheating is wrong only when you're bad at it. Let's look at one further problematic case, or let's not say problematic, let's say hard case for Kant. And then we'll move pretty quickly towards wrapping up. So let's think about, I didn't put this in the case, but let's assume that Hannah is a real estate agent. And here's something real estate agents sometimes do. They sometimes buy the more expensive, fancier car to try to impress their clients. And the thinking is, if you have a nice new BMW, then potential clients will think you're really successful. And if you're really successful, that means you're really good at, let's say selling houses. And so they'll list their house with you. You get more business, you're more successful. You're faking it till you make it in some way. So is this morally permissible? I didn't mean to state that so cynically. It doesn't need to be a bad or a faking thing. This is a business tactic, and business tactics like this seem okay. It seems like if we're wondering what Kant should be able to say here, we would want him to be able to say that this is morally permissible. It's morally permissible to try to stand out in a competitive business field. Doesn't seem like you're doing anything deeply morally wrong by doing something that's going to make you successful in your business, not hurting anybody, not lying to anybody. Again, you're not necessarily lying by buying the nicer car if you have the money for it. You're not stealing anything. What could make this wrong? Here's the problem, though. It seems like you might be able to universalize this, or sorry, might not be able to universalize this and still get what you want. Because imagine that all the agents who want to impress their clients buy the nicer of two cars or the nicer car. Um, it seems like your car is not going. You could make the argument that your car is no longer impressive. If all the real estate agents have the nice cars, then you're not standing out from the pack anymore. And so if that were true, you couldn't get what you wanted. You couldn't achieve your goal if everyone who had the same goal did the same thing. And that would make it morally impermissible, morally wrong on Kant's view. And that seems bad given what we just said, and that this seems like it's not wrong. So let me pause for a second and kind of pull back the curtain and show you some of the machinery that's going on that's assumed here but not made explicit. We'll make it explicit now. What we're doing is we're taking a theory, a moral theory, and we're testing it against what we kind of know to be true. We do this in science a lot, where we have some scientific theory and it predicts what should be true in the external, the empirical world, according to that theory. And then what we can do is we can take the theory and we can set it along actual data and say, all right, does what the theory says should be true, is that actually true in the world? And if it's not, then we can say, all right, well, that's a mark against the theory, right? It predicted X and X didn't happen, right? If you have some there's some theory of planetary motion that predicts there will be a moon around this planet, but you go out there or you look with your telescope and there's no moon, it's a mark against the theory. Well, we're kind of doing a similar thing in ethics here. You have this ethical theory, a theory about what makes wrong actions wrong. And it seems like it predicts that it's wrong for real estate agents to buy nice cars, but we kind of know that's not wrong. Similarly, we kind of know it's wrong to cheat on your history essay. So a theory that says it's okay, that's kind of a mark against the theory. All right. So here's what you say if you're Kant, I think. You say it actually is totally universalizable and you can still achieve your goal in case 4. Here's what you say. You say, maybe a couple of things. One is that an individual real estate agent will still be impressive to clients, even if she has a nice car, even if all the agents have nice cars. The reason is the clients are not going around and looking at all the different agents, right? So they might see 1 or 2, maybe 3, and they all have nice cars. That's still impressive to them. So they'll still think this is a good agent. It's still better for that agent business-wise than not doing it. A second reason here is the way this is stated. Imagine everyone buying the more expensive of 2 cars. That does not entail that everyone has the same level of nice car as Hannah. She might be choosing between a BMW and, I don't know, what's the next level down? I've been poor for too long. Lexus? But someone else might be choosing between a Lexus and a Toyota. And so they're picking the Lexus over the Honda when we universalize. Sorry, Lexus over the Toyota when we universalize. Hannah's picking the BMW over the Lexus when we universalize. And so she's still impressive, even relative to many other agents. So it could still achieve her goal, even when everyone is doing the same thing. Okay, so what we saw there was a few different applications of Kant's theory. I think it'd be easy to take that theory and say this is, this simplistic little 3-step process. And even if only implicitly or unconsciously in your brain think that this is the shallow thing. But in reality, there's something much deeper going on in Kant. This 3-step process is meant as an aid to help you understand the basics of the theory. And now in further videos, we're going to talk about why this is actually a deep claim about the nature of morality. And kind of teaser, it really has to do with what's fair in some sense in this way. So if I am doing something on Kant's theory, what makes an action wrong, let's say, is that I can't do it if or at least I can't get what I want out of it if everyone else who wants the same thing does the same thing. What that means is this. It means that if I'm going to do something wrong, my action for its very success requires that pretty much everyone else that is in the exact same position as me not do the thing that I want to do. It's almost like I'm saying to them when I say cheat on the exam, it's almost like I'm implicitly saying to other people, I get to do this and y'all can't do this. And it's almost like they're saying, why can't we do this? We're just the same as you. And I'm saying, yep, you're just the same as me, but I'm me and you're you. So I get to do this and you don't. That's the nature of immoral action for Kant, is that it only works if not everyone does it. And so it's almost a level of unfairness, or as we'll explain in the next video, almost irrationality, because you're saying that one person gets to do it, that is me, and the other people don't. And the only thing that's different about these people is that I'm me and that they're not me. So in a sense, Kant is saying what makes something is more immoral is treating yourself as special when you're no different from other people. All right, we'll stop there.